What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Johnny Lee Memorial League podcast. We are talking week 6 this week, the recap for week 6. Once again, hosting Paul, and I'm joined by Connor again this week. And as of now, it'll just be me and Connor. We'll see if Cody drops in or not, but if he does, then we'll welcome him on. But my co-host Connor, how you doing tonight?
Good. I'm starting to feel like I'm not a guest commentator for the pod. Had a very productive week 6, and hopefully that continues in week 7 and doing pretty good overall.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you and I are kind of starting to take this thing over. Obviously, when Cody and Braxton and other people that usually come on here, whenever they want to come on, they are welcome. But we'll just dive right into it for week 6, the recap for week 6. Let's start with the biggest blowout of the week. It was my matchup against Smell. The Norfolk Tides took down the El Paso Chihuahuas. The final score was 736 to 370. I'm going to let Connor go first because it's going to be a lot of me pumping my team up. But I'll let Connor go first.
I think I'm going to let Paul pump his team up quite a bit, but this matchup had more shock value for the first couple days where Smell had negative points or some very weird performances. There certainly are bright spots. Reese Olson with 27, as Smell said, is now the best 0-4 starter in MLB history. Jared Schuster looked fine as a long reliever out of the White Sox bullpen. Hunter Brown had a really strong long relief outing. But the Norfolk Tides are going with the Dan Hurley model, and I think 390 points from the bats, 346 from the arms. That is the consistency that you would want for a playoff team, and it seems like Paul has clearly gotten back to that. Yohan Duran, 36 points. Garrett Crochet, 47 in a one start. That looks like it's paying off well. Luis Heel has been a revelation. Hitting wise, very just consistent performances. Willie Adames with a 50-piece stands out to me. And Mitch Garver's turning it around a little bit. So impressive performance from the Tides, and Smell is just continuing the rebuild road. So I think both parties are completely fine with the result.
Yeah, just real quick for me. 3 bats this week went over 50, or 50 at least, I guess I should say, between Josh Naylor, who is my guy. Love him. He might be my new number 1 first baseman in prospect or in Dynasty. I mean, it's between him and Vinny P still. But yeah, Josh Naylor's an absolute dog. I love him. Willie Adames, who I got from Tita a few weeks ago. Brewer shortstop, 50 points. And then the little known, or he's well known, but little discussed, Randy Arozarena, who, obviously has had a slow start to the season, dropping 53 points from the sky. No big deal. Maybe he's back. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, Connor hit on it. 390 from the bats, 346 from the arms. It's exactly what I'm looking for. If I can do that every week, then I'm an absolute force in this league. Yeah, Luis Gill. I mean, Connor touched on it all. I was going to put my team up, but he kind of hit it all. I will say for Smell, 28 points out of Alek Manoah. His first real good start since he got demoted to rookie league. So obviously, something good might be there. And Reese Olson, really good pitcher, really underrated pitcher for Detroit. Yeah, I mean, there's not much you can say otherwise for Smell. Obviously, had a real tough start to the week, but I think 3 of the last 4 days, Smell barely edged me each of those days. So obviously, he has a team that is competitive. It's just not consistent. And it's all about finding that consistency. Obviously, it's probably not looking for him for this year, but certainly in the future, and he's definitely got the picks and the prospects, as we all know. So we'll move on to our next matchup. It was the Bismarck Larks. They took on the Richmond Flying Squirrels. Final score was 525 to 469. Bracton got the win. I think that was his first win of the season. I believe he's now 1-5. So real quick here, for Scott, Bryce Harper, really good player. Bryson Stott, the two Phillies really did well for him. Other than that, he had a Lars Nootbaar performance, but 311 out of the bats, not the best. It's obviously over 300 though. You can't really, sneeze at it. 0 points with 9 at bats from Brett Beatty, not ideal. 6 at bats out of Cedric Mullins, 4 strikeouts, -4 total, not ideal. And then CJ Abrams, who has been just an absolute star this year, had probably his only down week so far this season. Tough time for that, but the tail of the tape here, Scott really didn't get much of anything out of his bullpen. -14 out of Alex Lang really kind of set him back. I think he only scored 13 points out of the bullpen total. That's just not going to get it done any week, and especially, if he's, and I think he is. I think he can be a competitive team, come playoff time, whatnot. But if you're serious about being that playoff team, you can't just score 13 points from your bullpen or 14, whatever it was. But then as for Bracton, really, a decent performance. He finally found his way with the bats this week, and that's what carried him. 351 points. But yeah, his arms let him down just a little bit again. But no real blow up performances, I would say. I mean, he had Luis Ortiz, who, that's a reliever for him, -10 points. But otherwise, he didn't have anybody go negative. And as long as he can do that, obviously, I know that Bracton's team's young and inconsistent. But if he can keep that, in check, just make sure nobody goes blow up negative, then he can beat a team or two. 525 total, that's a competitive score. I'm not saying it's, going to beat the top teams week in and week out, but he'll get a few wins doing that. So overall, good week out of Bracton. What were your thoughts, Connor?
I do want to caveat this that I believe that Scott was out of the country during this week, so there could have been some suboptimal lineup or waiver decisions made, or I should say lack of, that could have hindered the scoring a little bit, but this does not take away from a good Bracton performance. 351 points from the bat, that is a competitive level. Rebuilding teams have the bats come first, but that's still a very good number. Ellie De La Cruz had 23 at bats and 48 points. That's a very good ratio. Anthony Volpe was 61. That is exactly what Bracton's looking for out of what I think is his true franchise player. Jackson Churio, a little bit of a down week, but that's just expected with all of the youth. And Shea Langoliers had a killer doubleheader against the Rangers, if I remember right. And there are some solid pitching performances as well. Mike Clevenger had a decent start. Patrick Sandoval, 42 in a 2-start week. So there's some talent here. And then for Scott, I think he's still very happy with how the first weeks of the season have gone. But this is a bump in the road. And I think it remains to be seen what adjustments he will make to continue to be a playoff team, or what a sell-off could look like if things continue to not go his way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good point. What you brought up earlier, Scott being out of the country, obviously not an ideal for fantasy purposes. Hopefully you had a good trip. But we'll move on to our next matchup. It was the Bowling Green Hot Rods. They took on the Nashville Sounds. Kind of toted before on last week's pod as maybe the matchup of the week. Certainly lived up to that hype. I think Tita had a lead on Sunday morning, but then kind of laid an egg on Sunday, and Cody just took over. Final score of this was 582 to 517. Just looking through here, Cody 582 is a little bit low for his standard. I know he wasn't thrilled, and I know he shook it up a little bit via trades this week. and some ad drop. Just looking through though, had pretty solid performances. Cody Bellinger came back from the injured list, dropped 54. Uh, let's see, Jazz Chisholm 50, Freddie Freeman 48. Trying to see why Logan Gilbert, obviously, negative 13 points, not a good week at all for Logan Gilbert. You're expecting, Logan Gilbert's probably a top 15, top 20 pitcher in this league. You're not going to get negative 13 too much out of Logan Gilbert. But as for Tita, 234 out of the arms, obviously 300 is the goal, or at least my goal. And then 283 out of the bats. So below 300 with both. That's going to lead to a lower score. It's hard to talk about Tita's team because half these dudes aren't even on a team anymore. So, not going to get too far into the weeds, discussing each and every player. But Simeon Woods Richardson is the one guy I did want to talk about. So he was a pretty highly touted prospect. I'm not even sure which team he's on now. I think he's actually on Cody's team. But he's been pretty solid in the Twins rotation this year. Just this one start, I think it was Saturday, is the first, quote unquote bad start that he's really had this year. But it'll be interesting to see how he kind of can adapt into Major League Baseball if he can stick in that rotation. I know it's pretty crowded, but it seems like they're going to give him that chance. So just that's one kind of player that I was looking at. But I'll hand it over to Connor just to see what your thoughts were.
Yeah, Tita was leading Sunday morning, and I think Tita could have pulled a Brock Lesnar streak breaker again, but it just wasn't meant to be. With Tita's strategy, there is a bunch of moving pieces going in and out, and sometimes you trade into duds. Bryce Wilson had a juicy start Sunday against the Cardinals, went for 0 points. David Robertson, a very tough matchup. Yandy Diaz had 9 at-bats for him and didn't really produce at the level he potentially could. Brandon Marsh, Kerry Carpenter to a lesser extent. Some of these bigger names that were acquired just did not push towards the cause. And with Cody, I think this matchup's absolutely terrifying. Tyler Glasnow was the clincher, having a very big start, 7 innings against the Padres in that pitching duel with Michael King, but some of Cody's pitching is vulnerable now. Walker Buehler's just coming back from an injury. Logan Gilbert obviously had a one-off. Jared Jones is going through a slightly rougher stretch. But the hot rods are only going to get better, so I'm very curious if another team, the next time that Cody will be seriously challenged.
Yep, all fair points, and we'll move on to our next matchup. It was this was probably the match of the week at the end of the day, and this is one that we talked about last week, Connor. It was the Clearwater Beach Dogs. They took on the Portland Sea Dogs. That was Hen, and that was Jab. And Jab and the Sea Dogs took this out. It was the final score of 657 to 639. Bit of an upset, I guess, maybe, but both obviously really solid teams. With this final score being separated by only 18 points, I've been looking through the matchup to try and maybe find where the difference was. And to me, it stands out that Jose Altuve for Hen only dropped 6 points for a full week and 21 at bats. Jose Altuve this year has been probably a top 3, top 5 second baseman. If you get vintage Jose Altuve this week, I think that probably changes the script. But then you could also argue, I guess, Tyler O'Neill for Jab. Only 5 points and 19 at bats. Tyler O'Neill obviously has been a 6 or 7 point bat this year. So if he does his, then it's even further of a win. So, it's pretty even across the board, 351 to 377 with the bats, and then 288 to 280 with the arms. So obviously, two really good teams. I think both of these teams are playoff teams. I mean, possible that it was a championship preview. Um, just really solid. Came down to the last day. So I commend both of these owners. Had nothing to hang your head about. But I'll pass it off to Connor.
I think this is a really good matchup. You mentioned Jose Altuve. One thing I noticed is that it was a very close matchup Sunday, and Altuve was out of the lineup. I was very surprised to see he had not tried to trade for a second baseman or get that fit, but who knows? I hesitate on championship matchup. I think both these teams are rated very highly going into the season and for good reason. But one thing that sticks out to me is that neither eclipsed 300 pitching points. If a team can consistently do that, then I think that is the ultimate tier of competitiveness. And there were just a couple rough spots all around. Emerson Hancock had a -2 and got demoted. Kevin Gausman had -3 and was yeeted off of Jab's team. For the Beach Dogs, Nick Pavetta -10. That's just not going to cut it for teams of these caliber, and they do happen to everybody. I think one other point that sticks out, Ronald Acuna Jr., the biggest name to move this offseason, 18 points and 20 at-bats. That is not what Hen acquired him for, and frankly, the first 6 weeks of the year, he has not been at 2023 levels at all. So I think moving forward, how Acuna performs is going to mean quite a lot. There are some solid performances overall, and I know I'm looking forward to the next Stinky Hound Bowl.
Yeah, Stinky Hound. I love that. But we'll move on to our next matchup. Probably an unexpectedly really solid matchup was the Hartford Yard Goats taking on the Rochester Red Wings. John Haidt versus Dave. Final score was 734 to 612. Just real quick, shout out to Dave, man. Like his team, nobody kind of thought would even be near as successful, but dropping 612 points, that's pretty freaking good. Like really solid, 365 from his bats. His bats are crazy. Like from guys that you really wouldn't expect. Connor Joe, 39 points. Like who would have thought Connor Joe was going to drop 39 points in a week this year? Like it's crazy. But then you have guys, usual suspects like William Contreras, 53, Torque and Riley Green, the Detroit guys, pretty solid this week. Heimer Candelario had 39. So like he has good talented players, but like again, just such a slept on team. I feel like 247 out of the arms is kind of where he fell short, and it's where John Haidt exceeded. Negative 27 total points between Trevor Rogers and Andrew Chafin. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Bullpen is what separates, average to good teams from playoff elite teams. When you total 1 point from your bullpen, it's really tough to take down a team like John Height's or any top team. But he still gave it a damn good run, like 71 points out of Bailey over 2 starts. Kyle Gibson, Jack Flaherty had 13 strikeouts, I think he had 12 in that one game, right? Or that was 2 weeks ago. That's my bad. But just a solid performance out of Dave. I really commend him for having such a great week. But just real quick on John Height's team, 416 points, just absolutely crazy from the bats. Who was it? Marcus Semien, I think. Yeah, Marcus Semien, 73 points, 2 homers. Like just obviously, Marcus Semien's a top 3 second baseman in the league. Hitting in the heart of that Texas Rangers lineup. So overall, really solid. Had really solid arm performance as well. 318 total. But yeah, we've come to expect that, I think, from John Height's team. So Connor, you're up. What do you got?
I mean, 734 points, 318 from the arms, and absolutely all-timer from the bats. This is the classic Yard Goats week. Shout out Dave. Uh, he had made some very strategic, almost sniper-like acquisitions of pitching. For some GMs, there's a lot of wheeling and dealing. Dave hones in on specific targets, and they have performed. Jack Flaherty was flipped for Dalton Varsho. He scored 40. Bailey Ober from Tita scored 71. I'm sure there are one or two other recent trades I'm missing. Kyle Gibson with 37 points. He was a borderline waiver wire guy, and he's having a very nice start to the season. And as you mentioned, some revelations on the waiver wire, unexpected names have been terrific for Dave. So Dave's 1-5. I don't think the playoffs are likely this year, but I can't wait to see what his next upset will be or what the team looks like later this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, the next upset, because it's coming. Like whoever's playing Dave, it's no longer that automatic win. And speaking of non-automatic wins, I think we'll move on to our next matchup. The Rocket City Trash Pandas, the newly branded, I should say, Rocket City Trash Pandas, as Hamco has relocated his team from Kannapolis to Rocket City. So shout out Hamco. He's had a tough start to the year this year. He's looking to shake up anything and shake up, and he decided midweek to pull a Baltimore Colts, and he left town and he's rebranded. So we'll see what the Trash Pandas can bring. Unfortunately for this first week there, it was a loss to Connor's Amarillo Sod Poodles. Final score here was 647 to 581. Connor, obviously we just talked about it. There's some teams now that in the past maybe were, thought of as weaker and automatic wins. I think your team kind of qualified as that, but obviously dropping 647 in a week, pretty solid. So I'll let you go ahead and start first. What were your thoughts here?
Yeah, shout out Homco. I think he's just an underrated GM, and his team has gone through a lot of injuries. 202 pitching points. The team can do better than that, and will as the season goes on. 379 points from the offense is also nothing to laugh at. Jose Miranda's having a bounce back year. Nick Castellanos is showing life, and Teoscar Hernandez is continuing to be a Dodger. Both teams scored 736, and I think that is what happens when that team fires on all cylinders. This is exactly what I want my team to be doing. This is probably the ceiling, 383 batting points from a mix of older veterans who I attempted to buy low and some waiver wire dudes. And then this is the first matchup in franchise history where I think the pitching separated me. Homco and I were within 5 points of the bats. I clinched the pitching by 62 points. Cal Quantrill with 30, Ryan Yarborough with 21 and a couple relief outings, Austin Gomber at 27. The smaller names are doing it, and hopefully they can continue it. But I think this was a very good week, and I'll definitely have some decisions ahead on how to tinker with it in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see. I'm not saying you're going to start fully buying, but buying an arm here and there, buying a bat here and there. I don't necessarily think you're way out of the playoff race. I don't know that you are just a shoe in because seems like Conforto dropping 45, but it looks like he's hurt now with a hamstring. Ringifo was on the aisle this week. So, obviously a few injury issues for your team. But man, 383 points from the bats, that's Cody level. That's John High level. That's my level. That's really up there. And then 264 from the arms. And let me say 264 from the arms with only 9 starts. You get 3 more starts in there, you're over 300. Unless they're all duds, but What are the chances of that? Because 3 more starts, yeah, you're pushing 700 probably. So, really solid week. Cal Quantrill with 30. Um, the bullpen looks like it did pretty well. It looks like you added a few here and there. But yeah, like again, I'm surprised. I shouldn't be surprised because I know that you're a great owner and you've very quietly just been building this team up. But like it's pretty impressive to see, how far your team has come. And um I mean, there's obviously you beat me this year, so obviously you can't just say, "Oh, yep, Amarillo, that's a win." And I think that's kind of good for the league in general, just to have every team at least somewhat competitive. So yeah, and then as for Hamko and his team, it's I mean, if I'm Hamko, I have no hair left because it's all been pulled out. Because 379 from the bats, how do you get much better than that? I mean, it was 4 points off of you, Connor. Like, again, like it's the arms, and I know he knows what it is. Like, I mean, it's not even the arms because like Brian Wu, good player, good pitcher. Charlie Morton, 41 points. How can you argue with that? McKenzie had 40 points with 2 starts, so 20 points to start. Nothing bad there. I mean, Sonny Gray let him down. Sonny Gray's been a solid pitcher this year. Had a bad start against, it looks like Milwaukee, maybe. So yeah, I mean, like 581 isn't the best, could be better, but still just solid. And I feel for Hamko because he is a good owner. I mean, I think he'll get it turned around. I think that he'll get back on track. But it's tough sledding right now, man. And I'm not sure what his next move is. I know he put out a pretty big block. I know he wants to shake it up a little bit, and I think you should try and take advantage of that. But we'll move on to our final matchup of the week. It was the Rocky Mountain Vibes taking down the Oklahoma City 89ers. It was Bry versus Chad. Um, you know, Final score was 720 to 549. Obviously, Bry has a really solid team. 361 from the bats, 359 from the arms. Literally 2 points off. I don't know how you beat that. But I'll let Connor take over if you got something to say here, Connor.
Yeah, I think Chad, of course, was the highlight of the offseason and for good reason. But the Oklahoma City Baseball Club has been a little inconsistent. 550 points one week, 650 the next. And perhaps that's expected with a team that is trying to clearly be on the up and up. Nathaniel Lowe with 46 points. Jordan Westberg continuing his hot streak. Some quality waiver wire ads. Dansby Swanson and Jung Ho Lee ended up on the injured list, but they're impact guys. Pitching wise, 276 points for the 89ers is nothing to laugh at, and the consistency between the bats and arms, 270 plus points each, is terrific. Bry's just too much of an animal at this point. I think his team is clearly in the top class. And Cole Reagans with 28, Scooble at 32, Suarez for 46. The list goes on of quality performances, and I just think the vibes are going to be very difficult to stop.
Oh, absolutely. And, Bry getting Vinny P, you know, obviously one of my favorite players, really kind of changes his team, in my opinion. 361 points, like I said, from those bats. Really solid. And then, you kind of touched on Bry and Chad, but as for Chad, it's tough. You mentioned it, Jung Ho Lee going down. Looks like that's more of a serious injury, might be a longer term injury. Who's been a really solid bat, really impact bat. Dansby Swanson doesn't seem as serious. Um, but losing that kind of bat for any length of time is going to have its impact. But yeah, like it's hard for Chad because I think you said it earlier that he's been the number one scored upon team so far this season. So, I mean, I still think he's got a really good team. He's just getting a lot of unlucky scheduling, I think, so far. Um, but when you play a team like Bry and the teams he's played already this year, I think he's played Cody once. I think he's played maybe John Height once. So you're not going to play those teams every week, and I think his schedule is going to open up for him a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see if he can keep everything together, keep a run going. Because I mean, I'm 3-3 now. Just me speaking personally now. Started 0-3, and I'm 3-0 my last 3 weeks. So schedules change and things open up. But overall, solid performance by Bry. But that will conclude our matchup breakdown. So we will move on to our trade portion, which, like I said last week, I think that's what most people like looking at, listening to. So we will get that kicked off with our first trade. Bracton received Bryce Terang, Chase Petty, and Moises Ballesteros, and Tita received Ezekiel Tovar. And there was a stipulation that if Tovar doesn't outscore Terang, that Tita or Bracton will owe Tita a two worst by Halloween. Interesting stipulation there. So for me, I'll break this down real quick and then I'll let Connor take over. I like Ezekiel Tovar. I traded him earlier this year for Ryan Weathers. Maybe a panic trade. I think certainly a panic trade for me. Probably undervaluing Tovar a little bit. But I do like what Bracton got here because to me, Bryce Terang, really solid player for Milwaukee, second base. Natural positions more at shortstop, but playing second base for the Brewers for now. Solid player. I think somebody tried to comp him with Tovar. I'd say Tovar is the better player. But then when you add in Chase Petty and Moises Ballesteros, I would say that tips it a little bit towards Braxton's favor. Chase Petty to me is a top 100 prospect. So yeah, I mean, I overall I would say I like it more for Bracton. I do think that Tovar will outscore Turang, so I don't think that Sip will hit. But what are your thoughts, Connor?
Yeah, I'm a big Tovar guy as well, but I think this is exactly the kind of deal that Bracken need to be doing after last week's theme of paying up for big names. Ezekiel Tovar is a really talented guy, but I know Tita's very high on Chase Petty, so the fact that he moved along with another young infielder to get Tovar definitely surprised me. I get where both sides came from, but really love what Bracken did here.
Absolutely, and we'll move on to our next trade. I referenced it just a minute ago, but Tita received Christian Encarnacion Strand, known as CES by me. He got Andy Rodriguez, and he got a 26 first rounder. It was actually Tita's own 26 first rounder. And Bry got Vinny Pasquantino, Smells 26 second round pick, and Hens 27 first round pick. For me, real quick, Vinny P for me is number one dynasty first baseman. Maybe one or two now with Josh Naylor. So I think I like this more for Bry. I mean, I like CES too. Don't get me wrong, but when you also factor in that he got two pretty high picks, Bry did. Yeah, overall, I think it's more for Bry. I think he is probably just going to wait for CES to. Well, never mind. He traded him like an hour later. So, but anyway, CES on the injured list. So when he gets healthy, I think he'll increase his value. But for this trade, I like it more for Bry's side. So, Connor, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, there is a lot going on here. I Christian Encarnacion-Strand is definitely talented, and I think he's already gotten opportunities in the 3 and 4 hole for the Reds, who could be an explosive offense but are underperforming. I think I prefer Bry here since he very clearly is trying to acquire the most win now player and doesn't completely give up a barn of picks, specs, or more proven talent to get him. But I think this is definitely a really interesting one.
Absolutely, and we'll skip down a few to this trade. This is just, to me, this is an interesting one. Tita received Rainer Arias, David Peterson, and a 2026 third-round pick. And UConner received Yandy Diaz. For me, this is a definite clear sign that you were trying to buy a little bit. Yandy Diaz, first base in Tampa. So I like Yandy Diaz. I think he's been underperforming just a touch this year. But still, obviously, a producing bat, really helped your offense this week, scored at 380 or whatever points you scored. But what were your thoughts here, Connor?
Yeah, so Tita came offering Yandy Diaz, who is on the older side, 32, I think, but definitely a very talented player who I consider almost a top 100 fantasy asset. So David Peterson has been, I think Paul and I are both big fans of him, but it's unclear when he'll get a Mets rotation spot. And a couple other assets, I thought it was a very nice buy low. So. And Yandy he had a rough day today, but's been performing otherwise.
Yeah, I think you and me are the only two David Peterson fans in this league. I think without us, he'd probably be a free agent. But Rainer Arias, another interesting piece, I think, in this deal. Young outfielder for San Francisco. You know, some say that he's going to be a big star. Some don't think he'll ever see the majors. So a very volatile prospect. But, regardless, we'll move on. To this trade, it was between me and Tita. Tita received Alex Verdugo and a 2026 fourth. I received Braden Taylor, Joey Loperfido, and said, the player we just talked about, David Peterson. For me, it was an opportunity to move an outfielder because my outfield was pretty strong already. And I saw an opportunity to kind of reload a little bit on assets, getting Braden Taylor and Joey Loperfido. For Loperfido, he's already in the bigs. He's with Houston. Not sure how long he'll stay, how much opportunity he'll get. But he had a really strong start to the year in the minors, hitting I think 10 home runs in 3 or 4 weeks. So I do think he is a major league player. I'm not sure how good he is. He might just kind of be a utility guy because he can also play first base, second base. But for me, the prize was Braden Taylor. I traded him away to Tita, I think, in the Junior Caminero trade a few weeks back. Of all the pieces I gave away, he's probably one of the ones that I regretted the most losing. So for me, it was nice to get him back because I think he's a solid top 50, top 60 prospect. I know that's not reflected right now, but he went to TCU. He has a high batting average, good hit tool, some speed, not much, some power. Hoping that'll develop a little bit. But for me, it was Braden Taylor was the main get here. But I'm curious your thoughts, Connor.
Yeah, I think I really like this for Paul. I remember a couple weeks ago, Alex Verdugo was essentially moved for a worse, and he's the cleanup hitter for the Yankees, so his value certainly increased. Joey Loperfido's a very interesting piece, and who knows, but I think Paul could definitely reroute him for some pieces. Braden Taylor is doing terrific in high A, and David Peterson, Paul, and I are the two members of that fan club, so I think Paul did great here, but Tita got a guy that I think is a good fit on his team.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex Verdugo, no shade at all to Alex Verdugo. That short porch in right field for the Yankees plays a lot into his early on success for them this year. But we'll move on to our next one. It was Tita receiving Jose Barrios and Brent Rooker, and Cody got Simeon Woods Richardson, the player we just talked about, Alex Verdugo, and Tyler Black. I'll touch on this real quick, and then I'll let Connor go. For me, Jose Barrios probably the best player in this trade. I don't know that he's the flashiest pitcher, but for me, he's just a solid 20-point pitcher. He's been very consistent the last few years. Basically, ever since he came over in the real life trade from Minnesota to Toronto. um, Simeon Woods Richardson, we talked about earlier, pretty volatile, but was a former successful prospect. So I do like him. We talked about Verdugo and Tyler Black. I think Tyler Black is pretty underrated. I think he's a solid corner infield player for the Brewers. I think he's got pretty solid power. I could see him being a 25, 30 home run type bat. So I do like more, I guess, what Cody got. Because for me, Brent Rooker isn't much. I know he's been hitting pretty well recently in Oakland, but overall, I'd take Cody's side on this. I know it seems like we're kind of crapping on Tita because we've mostly talked about his trades, and I don't think I've sided with him once. But obviously, Tita knows what he's doing in general. But Connor, I'll head over to you.
I mean, this is literally the Semana de Tita that he said. He had like 25 trades in a row in one stretch. Before I discuss the trade, I have a trivia question for Paul. Do you know the prospect deal the Twins got back in the Barrios trade?
No, hit me with it. I should know it, but hit me with it.
Austin Martin and a dude named Simeon Woods Richardson.
There you
Um,
go.
So this trade is kind of poetic, and I'm not high on SWR as some others. I do think Barrios is definitely the key to the deal, where he's had some absolute blowups, but definitely has the capacity to be the best player in the deal, and I think has this year performed. Verdugo and Tyler Black are just going to solidify Cody's bench, and Brent Rooker's performed as well. So I do like the Cody side a little bit. I think I'm going to go with Tita on this one just because of the more proven pitcher.
Yeah, and I should have known that because I was looking at the next trade that we were talking about, and I wasn't really thinking. But yeah, obviously Simeon Woods Richardson definitely involved in that trade. So good call there by Connor. But we will move on to our next trade. This was kind of a big one, and this is one I want to definitely get into with Connor. Tita received Josh Lowe, and Connor got Lourdes Gurriel. And let's see, he got 1, 2, 3, 4 2025 third round picks, a 25 fourth round pick, a 26 first round pick, a 26 second round pick, a 26 third round pick, and a 26 fourth round pick. So how many assets was that, Connor?
11 or 12.
7, 8, 9. I'm counting 10. So 10.
Okay.
So 10 so it's 10 assets for Josh Lowe. So I'll start, and then I'll let Connor speak his piece. 10 assets for Josh Lowe. On his face, obviously, I think we could all agree. 10 assets for a guy that's kind of, unproven. Maybe he'll be good, maybe he won't be. I think that's, on paper, that's a definite win for Connor. Here's my contention. And Connor's probably going to disagree with me, and that's fine. For me, Josh Lowe, if he is that guy, Josh Lowe could be the face of the Amarillo Todd Poodles if he were to stay there. And obviously, with Josh Lowe going to Tita, he might have already traded him. But if he hasn't, then Josh Lowe could be on the move any minute. But I mean, again, I will say that I think Connor did well here. But for me, if you're Connor, if you're trying to build that roster, I think the value of having a player like Josh Lowe outweighs having a Lourdes Gurriel and 9 other picks. Obviously, just my opinion, because those 9 picks, I mean, one of them was a first round pick, and then one of them was a second round pick. The rest are thirds and fourths. I mean, third and fourth round picks. I'm not saying you can't find a good player, but they're exceedingly more rare, I would say. So yeah, I mean, I get it. I get why Connor did it. He's loading up in the draft. Obviously, we've seen it work pretty well with Chad. It's a strategy that Smell is currently pulling. So I'm not. I don't want to come off as being a hater here, but it's Josh Lowe is kind of a guy that I was hoping would stay with Connor just a little bit longer, just to see how he would be if he would hit. And I think he hit a home run tonight as we're recording this. But Connor, obviously, I think you're probably going to disagree. I don't think you'll disagree that I think you did win the trade. But let's just hear your thoughts here.
Yeah, so Pita is the ultimate situational trader, where he's the best trader in a bunch of different things, but more than any other GM, I think he locks in on a specific need or player and then will do what he needs to do to get there. So the fact that he asked, would you do Lords and all my draft picks for Josh Lowe wasn't the most surprising thing. I need a franchise player, and I do want to commend Paul for advising me on the side and mentioning during the pod he would have been a good franchise player. What this came down to me for was confidence in how I could use these assets. Am I going to make all these draft picks? Who knows? I do know that every week there's one or two people that get put on the trade block that say, this guy for one or two assets, this guy for any asset. And I historically think that I have a very good track record of those. So this move is more my confidence that I can use those 10 assets to get a better return than a Josh Lowe could, whether that be through one player or some other method down the road.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. That's fair enough. But so we will move on to our next one then. It was again Tita and Connor. And it was Tita getting Bryce Wilson and Connor getting Jarrell Perez, Ben Lively, and Zaire Hope. Um, I wasn't. I don't think, at least, and Connor can correct me if I was wrong, but I mean, I don't think I was crapping on Connor just then. But if I was, I'm just going to do the opposite right here. Getting those 3 players for Bryce Wilson to me is an absolute masterclass. For me, Ben Lively is as good, maybe even better than Bryce Wilson. He pitched really well for Cincinnati last year, and then he moved same state, different city to Cleveland, where it seems like they get everything out of every pitcher that's ever come through there. So for me, Ben Lively alone takes down Bryce Wilson, and then to get what seems like 2 other assets, probably worse. To me, it's just an absolute masterclass. So Connor, it's a smaller trade, but I just wanted to hit on this real quick. So what were your thoughts?
Yeah, so at the time, Tito was in a very competitive matchup with Cody, and Bryce Wilson had a big Sunday start against a shriveling Cardinals offense. So after Wilson had 4 or 5 starts, I wanted to make sure that I was getting a relatively full starting pitcher price for him. And I think instead of offering more prospects, he decided to throw Ben Lively in there, and I'm fully comfortable with that. One footnote to this is that Bryce Wilson did come back to me Sunday after that start for, I think, those 2 prospects. So the deal essentially was me acquiring Ben Lively for nothing, which I'm very happy about.
Yeah, I just read that because it was basically two worse that you got for Bryce Wilson a day later, because Tito wanted to get that started in against Cody. So basically, yeah, you getting Ben Lively for free. Again, I just think that's a home run. But we will move on to our next trade. It seems like Sunday was the big trade day, so we'll just dive right in here. Tita received Colton Cowser, Kevin Gossman, and Wilkeman Gonzalez. And Jab got, as we mentioned before, he got Josh Lau and Chris Paddock. Connor, I'll hit you first. What are your thoughts?
Tita. Kevin Gossman's had a couple rough outings, but when he is on, he is a Cy Young finalist and consensus top 10 pitcher in the league. Those typically go for Barnes. Colton Cowser is another big name who got off to a hot start and still been struggling. I still think going forward he could be a very good third or fourth outfielder. Is he a young star? I'm not sure. And Josh Lowe, my old buddy, is a big name to get back, but I think Kevin Gossman's the biggest name in this deal, and I could argue that Colton Cowser's third. So I absolutely love this move for Tita.
Yeah, I like it. I like it for Tita. I don't know that I love it for Tita. Um, I will say Tita did win just because of Kevin Gossman. Kevin Gossman, I word for word agree with Connor there. When he's on, he's really on. He has been off though a little bit this year. Um, for me, Colton Cowser, I've said it before. I still believe it that he's a very volatile type of player. He could just be an all-star, perennial all-star, but I also see the path that he's, barely rosterable in this league. Um, so we'll see. That's a to be determined type of player, but the same could be said about Josh Lowe. Um, he could be that 30-30 type player, or he could hit 210 and strike out too much. Like I could see it both ways. Um, but the clear difference in this trade to me is the Gossman and Gonzalez for Paddock. Um, I like Paddock. I've owned Paddock twice, I think, this year, but I don't think he's near the caliber that Kevin Gossman is. So yeah, I would also say W Tita. So not all bad, I guess, this week for Tita. But we'll move on here. Another interesting trade that Tita made like within the hour, I think. It was Tita getting Tink Hence and a 2025 second round pick for Ezekiel Tovar. Um, I think Tink Hence is probably universally a top 50 prospect. Really solid for the Cardinals. I do question if he's going to be a starter in Major League Baseball. Um, I'm not sure he has that stamina built up or ability to hold it. Um, and I've talked about Ezekiel Tovar a million times, I feel like, on this podcast, so I won't talk too much about him. But I will say I would lean slightly towards Tita. I think that second round pick carries a lot of weight in this deal. Um, I think it's the difference between winning and losing this trade. But Connor, I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah, so this is like the third time I've come second in the Tovar sweepstakes, whatever. My package of Lords plus didn't work, but in all seriousness, I think this is a pretty serious deal for both sides. Tink Hence is certainly a bullpen risk, but an electric arm, no doubt. And a second round pick does carry quite a bit of weight. So I think Smell has a nice franchise cornerstone, and Tita has a couple big assets to play with down the road. So. I really like the deal all around.
Yeah, absolutely. And then a couple more here we'll get to. But this happened later Sunday evening. It was Cody getting Andy Pajes, and Tita once again takes back Alex Verdugo, and he also got Drew Jones. So both of them were kind of talking to me as they were making this deal um, about the differences and similarities between Pajes and Verdugo. I think Pages has the higher ceiling, but he also I think has the lower floor. So it's a little bit interesting what exactly he'll become in LA. He's getting a lot of run right now. I think at the expense probably of James Outman, who's been struggling a lot this year. Uh, I don't know how much run he'll get if he starts struggling. Because right now he's been pretty good. Because they have money to spend if they want to go trade for somebody, if they want to sign somebody. I'm just not sure exactly how much patience they're going to have with Pages. But if they have a lot of patience, then I easily could see Pages becoming, I'm not saying like an all-star, but just a really solid outfielder. Um, Whereas with Verdugo, I think that, and I talked about it before in the podcast, but I think that right field fence is helping a lot with Verdugo. Plus, being surrounded by just a lot of talent in that Yankee lineup, Juan Soto, Aaron Judge, so on, so on. Rizzo. But I think even without that, I think you're still getting a solid, 5-point bat. Right now he's probably hitting about a 6-point bat, but even still without that, he doesn't strike out. He walks a good amount. So yeah, Verdugo kind of is what he is. So it holds, obviously that holds value. And then Drew Jones to me is, I think he's very overrated being in the top 100. I think he's not that at all. So that to me is kind of a throw in. Maybe I don't want to say a worst, but maybe just a step above that. That might be a controversial take, but until he can start hitting above 200 in the low minors, to me he's not much. He's not worth too much to me. But I'm interested in your thoughts here, Connor.
Yeah, so out of 14 people in the league, I could see where 3 or 4 are Drew Jones enthusiasts and the other 10 are just not going for him. So my guess is that Tita acquired Drew Jones to move to one of those owners, but realistically, I think this is a fair deal for both sides. Verdugo and Pages, they're the kind of similar players as you touched on. Paz maybe has the higher ceiling, and Verdugo, you know what you're getting. So I do like the deal, but yeah, this was a fun one.
Yeah, it was fun, getting into it with Cody and getting into it with Tita. But we'll head on to our last trade that we'll talk about. Surprise, surprise, it was Tita again, and he received Lourdes Gurriel and AJ Bluebaugh, and Connor got Jaron Duran, and they canceled a Tyler Molly stipulation with his trade. It's funny because I had said that Connor should have kept a guy like Josh Lau. I'm not saying Jaron Duran is like a star or like a cornerstone type of player, but I think he's a very clear step ahead of Lourdes Gurriel. And I think he's a player that will help Connor a lot should he choose to compete this year. But even if he doesn't, I think he's only 27. So just now, I think entering the prime for his career. It's just a really solid. Even if he uses them as a trade piece, I think he could get a really solid return out of that. Whereas I don't think he would have gotten that from Gurriel. Unless it was me and I wanted to make sure that he didn't go back to Scott. That was basically the only way that I would have traded anything to make sure that didn't happen. But overall, yeah, I like this for Connor. I think Duran's a really solid player. So Connor, what were your final thoughts here?
Yeah, so I have my questions on Lourdes going forward. I think he's definitely had his hot stretches, but I think of a lot of his values innately just playing in Arizona in the 5-hole rather than the hitter himself. Jaron Duran's definitely an exciting piece. I still have not decided whether I'm going to keep him or not. One or two GMs have asked about him. So I guess bring the Barnes if needed, but I do think after moving low, Duran could be a nice fit, and the deal just seemed right.
Yeah, no, absolutely couldn't agree more. But that will conclude our trades portion of this podcast. With just Connor and I, it's moving along pretty well, pretty nicely paced, I think. But that will take us to our final segment of this podcast, which is the Week 7 preview. It's crazy to say Week 7 already, but season's moving along. But let's just jump right into it. We'll start with my matchup. It is the Norfolk Tides. We are taking on the Richmond Flying Squirrels. It's me versus Scott. This is our narrative matchup preview. The first of 3 matchups we have this year because we're also in the same division. So it's a scheduling quirk, but we play each other actually 3 times this year. I'll let Connor actually speak first here. What are your thoughts for our matchup, Connor?
Oh, I love this matchup. Paul's team was the 6 or 7 seed in the wild card last year, was clearly looking to take a step forward, had a rough first 3 weeks, and has looked absolutely killer the 3 since. Scott, everyone knew he would be competitive going into the year and has taken a great step forward the first few weeks, kind of a clunker against Bracton. So I do think Paul is going to win this just based on the infrastructure already there. But I do think Scott has done a phenomenal job taking over for, I believe, Scoop and building this roster up. And I think this is going to be one of those that might fall off on Friday, or Paul is going to win most of the way, but still keeps it close. So I could definitely see this being a 700 or to 600 spot.
Yeah. I at the end of it. So long story short here, I think I'll pick me to win as well. My team's been just absolutely on fire, I think, but I do agree with Connor. I think this doesn't get much larger than 150 points, 200 points most. At any point this week. I do believe Scott's going to keep it close with me all week, just because that's kind of been what we do between us. But yeah, I mean, for me, I think the key is going to be George Kirby. He's already made 1 start, and I think he's on a 2-start week this week. So it's going to be tough for Scott to hang in with, in my opinion, a top 3, maybe top 5 pitcher, dynasty pitcher for sure in baseball. So yeah, I never look forward to it. Fortunately, at least at the moment, Scott doesn't have Lord of Curiel. Who has him now? Tita, or whoever has him now. Hopefully it's Tita. PSA to Tita, please don't trade Lord of Curiel to Scott. I would greatly appreciate it. But we will.
Lord is currently with Homco.
Oh, Homco has him now? Okay. PSA to Homco, please don't trade Lord of Curiel to Scott. Please and thank you. But we will move on to our next matchup. It's Battle of the LMs. It's Bracton versus Cody. It's the Bismarck Larks. It's the Bowling Green Hot Rods. Congrats one more time to Bracton for getting off the 0-win train this past week. I do think that's where it ends, though. I think he's back in the loss column this week. Obviously, Cody and his team are just absolutely on fire, undefeated. So yeah, I mean, long story short, I'll take the Bowling Green Hot Rods here. The question is, can Cody get back at least into the 600s, if not the 700s, if not the 800s at the end of the day? Down week this past week. But that's kind of what I'm looking for. Will Cody regain his status as top dog in this league? But what are your thoughts, Connor?
Yeah, so it's the second lowest scoring team versus the highest. Cody's going to win this. Cody might win this if he was out of the country, but realistically, I think this is just going to hinge on specific player performances going forward. How does the Jackson 2 or Jackson 3 left for Bracton still perform? Bracton's been savvy on the waiver wire. Folks like Max Kepler, Jose Caballero, how much do they help the team, and can they move for other pieces? Joe Ross already has 26. And for Cody, some of the bigger ticket names, Vaughn Grissom really has not done too much since coming back. Hunter Green's off to a nice start now. Logan Gilbert bounced back from his rough start. So can Cody hit those consistent 700, maybe 800 points that he'd hope for? So there's a lot of variance here. Cody's going to win it, but it'll be interesting. It'll be fun to see what the point totals are.
Yeah, absolutely. That's both sides. I would say that's what we're looking for. I think from that matchup, more so than the outcome. But we'll move on to our next matchup. It is Connor's matchup. He is taking on Smell. It's the Chihuahuas. It's the Sod Poodles. It's the Good Boy Bowl. So for me, I think I believe Smell said that he's going out of the country this week. So obviously he starts at a disadvantage. Looks like he has his lineup set though for the week. But that day-to-day management might not be there. So I think he's already at a disadvantage. But I think even without that, like we've said, kind of all podcasts, Connor's team is, I would say not even sort of legit. I think it's just legit. And I think because of that, I think he's going to take this matchup. Similar thing to what we said for Cody's matchup, obviously not in the same vein. But what I'm looking for here is Connor, if he's going to score 600 points again. Because if he scores 600 points again and does it 2 weeks in a row, and obviously I don't know what he scored the week before, but I'm pretty sure it was in the high 500s, and that's kind of where he's been all season. It's hard to say like, oh well, it's just start of the season, it'll come back down to earth. It'll be very clear and very obvious at that point that it's a team that you just can't take lightly. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to from this matchup. But obviously, it's your matchup, Connor. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, even if Smell was in the country, I'm going to win this. I'm currently up 22 points with 14 less innings pitched. I think some of the day-to-day management that I'll bring in Smell can't, just given the circumstances, will help. But I'm very confident in my team after last week, and hopefully, if the 600-point barrier is broken, I think I will have to more seriously consider a surprise playoff run.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? I love the cockiness too. There, he said that even if I wasn't, or even if Smell wasn't out of the country, he'd still beat his ass. I love the confidence here from Connor. But we will move on to our next matchup. It's Tita against Hen. It's the Nashville Sounds versus the Clearwater Beach Dogs. Probably the undercard, in my opinion, for matchup of the week. We'll get to what I think is definitely the top matchup of the week coming up next. But for this matchup, I'll let Connor start. What do you think?
Tita and Hen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is already getting off to a good 198 to 171. I think Hen pulls away with this. Tita just is now, you know what you're getting from Tita. He's going to be a playoff team. He's going to do what's necessary. With Hen, there is just more on the line. I believe the Beach Dogs are currently at a 3-3 start. So at some point, you can't fall into too large of a hole. And third in that division is not what the Beach Dogs are looking for. So I do think Hen is going to make some moves to adjust his team if he falls behind. But I do think that this is going to be within 50 points.
Yeah, I would actually agree with that. I think this is going to be a very close matchup. I think both teams get into the 600s. for me, I'm just looking through what their double starts are, and it looks like Waka and Ray and JP Sears for Tita, assuming they make second starts if they're on the team long enough. But then for Hen, it looks like Chris Sale, Pavetta, and Imanaga. And I think there's your difference right there. Just those three guys, obviously really, really solid players, really solid pitchers. And I think that'll probably end up being your difference. I think Hen will take it probably 50, 60, maybe 70 points as your difference. So yeah, but again, two teams, really solid teams, even better owners. So that'll be obviously a great one to watch. But we'll move on to our next matchup. It is the Portland Sea Dogs and it is the Hartford Yard Goats. It's Jab versus John Height. To me, this is the matchup of the week. Both really solid teams. John Height, obviously, after that one loss to Tita, has not lost since. I think he scored in the 700 points each week. So clearly that was a wake-up call, I think, for John Height. But, Jab's got a really good team. His bats are crazy. He's already got 140 points from his bats since Tuesday night. Eric Fetty for the White Sox has been an absolute revelation this year. He's had 3 separate 40-point pitching performances, which is just wild to say because, we're talking about a guy that was overseas last year, pretty widely considered to be a Major League Baseball washout. But to have the success, he's between him and Crochet, two guys that didn't start a single game in Major League Baseball last year, are probably arguably the top 2 pitchers for the White Sox. Pretty crazy to say. I'm stalling because I don't know who exactly I want to pick in this matchup. I think I'm actually going to lean towards Jab here, and I'll tell you why. Tonight, Ronel Blanco, starting for Houston, was pulled or not pulled. He was ejected after 3 innings due to a foreign substance, and with that carries that 10-game suspension. So you're not. It doesn't at least seem like you're going to get another start out of Blanco for John Height. So for that reason, I think I'm going to take Portland. I'm going to take Jab here. But this is a matchup I think both teams could approach 700. I think whoever cracks 700 is going to be the winner, and I think it's going to be Jab.
I think both teams will crack 700. I do think Jab is also going to pull the upset. If we can even call it that at this point. Aaron Nola threw a complete game shutout. 50 points. I think currently it's 45. For a matchup of this quality is very hard to come back from. So I do think that Height's going to have his work cut out for him, and one roster spot with a looming suspension is not going to help. Both bats are insane, so there's certainly a possibility that John has a 200-point day and comes back from this. But I think that Jab's lead is certainly going to help quite a bit here.
Yeah, no, I think it definitely plays a part. Both teams are already well over, I should say, 200 points as we speak. So, but we'll move on to our next matchup, and this is definitely an interesting matchup. It's the Rochester Red Wings and the Oklahoma City 89ers. This is Dave and this is Chad. Much like Connor's team, we already talked about Dave's team as not being that pushover team that it kind of was at points last year and even early this year. So yeah, this is definitely a matchup that I'll be watching all week. It looks like Dave has he'll get to his 12 starts. At least as of now, I'm not sure if Chad has set his lineup or not. But So looking at this matchup with Chad, he already has a negative 17-point performance out of Jack Leiter because he started tonight. So obviously that's going to go against him, but it looks like Yamamoto's going right now. It looks like he'll get a win. This is going to be a close matchup. I actually think it's going to be closer than most people think. I think both these teams will be around 600. It's hard to pick against Chad here because I like Chad's team so much. But yeah, I'll pick Chad's team, but this is going to be a very close matchup. I think it's going to be very much a matchup Chad's not looking forward to. Because I think Dave and his team is just so good. It's just so underrated. But long story short, I'll take Chad here. But Connor, what do you think?
I'm going to take Chad here, and Chad certainly had a rough schedule, but his team is 2-4, and 2-5 is not going to be a good start whatsoever. It's early to think about the playoffs, but I believe that Chad is currently the 8th seed, so getting to 3-4 rather than 2-5 would be a massive deal for those chances. I think Dave's going to give it his all. I could definitely see another big pitching acquisition coming in for both teams this week. But I do think this is going to be within 100 points. Chad maybe in the high 500s, low 600s, and Dave putting up a competitive fight the entire way.
Absolutely, and we will get into our final matchup for this week for this podcast. It is the Rocky Mountain Vibes taking on the newly minted Rocket City Trash Pandas. It's Bry versus Hamco. I unfortunately, the schedule doesn't get a whole lot easier here for Hamco as he takes on, in my estimation, the most balanced team, possibly the best team as well with Bry. I'm going to take Bry in this matchup. I know that Hamco currently has a 13-point lead. I don't think it's going to hold up, unfortunately, for him. I think Bry is too deep. He's too loaded. Insert any adjective you'd want here. I just think Bry's going to get it done this week. I think he has the bullpen. I think he has the rotation, and he has the depth with his bats to get it done. So that's who I'll take. I think he'll crack 700 this week, as he's done most weeks. So, Connor, I'll hand it off to you. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I do think that right now the Trash Pandas are winning, but have 15 more innings than the Vibes do. The Vibes are a vibe, man. I agree that they're incredibly balanced. Brian makes smart waiver acquisitions and has had the key trades to add where necessary. Hamzo's team's just so injured. I do think a shakeup is coming, but it's not going to get any easier. And the Vibes are part of the class of the league along with Cody. So I do think this might not be a competitive matchup, but for at least Tomko's team, it is going to say a lot on where the newly minted Trash Pandas go.
Yeah, it's Hamco. I think he's got a good team, and again, like I said, if he has hair left, I commend him for it. But that will conclude our breakdowns, previews for this upcoming week. So now we'll get into any last final thoughts. Connor, if you had any, the floor is yours.
Well, Paul, you've done a terrific job being a host back-to-back weeks. I know last year we had 6 or 7 people join the pod at various points, so I'd love to see other owners hop in and give their thoughts. If there are any trades or things we didn't cover, please reach out either in the YouTube comments or just DM us. I think this is just great for the league. We've spent a lot of time talking about Dave's competitiveness, the way that Smell's team is going. My team on the up and up. There are 14 teams, and it's sure there can be a little bit of tone at the top with the Cody and Bry class, but every matchup does have some sparks, and it's another great week and going to be one for the league in its entirety.
Yeah, absolutely. And you kind of touched on it. It's just, to me, it's a really just strong indication of how great this league is. That there are people that have this desire to A, be on the podcast, but B, listen to the podcast. Because I know that most everyone here listens at least occasionally to this, which obviously, as long as that happens, we'll keep doing it. Um, but for me, it's like, obviously this is a free league. There's no money involved aside from paying for the Fantrax premium. Um, so for me, it's hard. It's easy to say like, oh well, I have a good team. Like obviously, I'm competitive in it, but for like a Connor, for Dave, for these teams that last year weren't very good, to put in the work that both those guys and everybody here has, like for that to happen in a free league, like it says a lot to me about the character of the people in this league, but also like the quality of owners that we have here. Like I think 1 to 14, we have a really solid group. And I just wanted to, I mean, whoever's listening still, at this point, just shout out you guys, man. Like you guys make this league what it is. It's not me, it's not Cody, it's not Braxton. Like you guys make this league so fun and so competitive, to the point that like, yeah, like Connor just said, every matchup for the most part um has just been competitive, and you really don't see that in especially 14 team leagues, because like it's so easy like for Connor or for Dave or whoever to have just been like, oh, my team stinks, who cares, I'm just gonna maybe set my lineup, maybe not, maybe check Discord once a week, maybe not. And yeah, like just shout out you guys. And I don't want to be on the soapbox here, Connor saying I'm the real MVP. No, you guys are the real MVPs, like for real. So I just appreciate you guys. And that'll end my little spiel here. So for me, Connor, for everybody, appreciate you guys listening. We'll be back next week, hopefully Sunday. I'm gonna try to get it, whether it's me, whether it's Cody or Braxton or whoever's on the pod. We want to try and do these on Sunday, obviously, because that's fresh in our minds. The week just finishing and all that. But it happened to just work out that it was Tuesday this week. It's not ideal, but we still want to make sure that we get something out every week during the season.